Little field work again today here, guys. I'm actually in my driveway. This is a friend's vehicle, and really it's a no paid job, but it'll be good for all of us. It's a 1993 Honda Accord, and the complaint with this is when it gets hot it shuts off and doesn't start. Now what he told me is it will run off of propane whenever the car dies, and they did check for spark and they had spark, so they're not missing spark, and it will run when they give it a fuel source. So it sounds like we're, you know, maybe losing fuel pressure, losing injection pulse, something like that. What I need to do first is get this car to act up. My suspicions are main relay. We've done a few of these, or ignition switch. We'll see where this leads us. I'm going to start the car and let it run. All right, I'm gonna shut the camera off for a minute, and we'll come back to this whenever I can duplicate this condition. He said if I let the car idle for about a half an hour, it'll die, and that's what I'm hoping for. So, see what happens. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes, and I've not been able to duplicate this. I did find the main relay and tapped on it, and I wiggled the ignition switch, two of the most common causes of intermittent no starts on Hondas, and having a little bit difficulty duplicating this. So one of the things I've learned over the years is to shut the hood. You know, sometimes you let a car run with the hood open, you're not getting the underhood temperatures as hot as they need to be. And so now I'm going to leave the hood shut for a little bit, and we'll come back to it again. Okay, it finally died. That was about 40-minute run time. Another trick some of you might know, some of you may not, is to close the door, turn the heat on, and that's one way that you can get these main relays to heat up a little faster, is get the interior hot. And I'm not sure if that's what happened or not. And I was actually, I got back in it, was revving it up, and it just died. Let's see if I can. Yeah, that's it. Nothing. And when I was giving it gas, it kind of bogged and died, which does sound like a fuel issue. Some other checks we can do while we're sitting here would be to eyeball this check engine light right here. So key off, key on. We want to make sure that that light lights. We can watch the tachometer for a little bit of a bouncing, which could indicate an RPM signal. You know, this test isn't foolproof, but really see no movement of that tack. Working by myself, trying to think about next direction I want to go. Okay, still thinking about this main relay and ways to quickly check it. One of the things that I like to do on these Hondas, knowing circuit design is important, but the idle air control valve right here is powered up on the same circuit the injectors are on from the main relay. So I'm just going to back probe this and see if my test light lights, and that is really brittle, so I'm going to just touch it on the front side here, and yeah, we have power on that circuit, so that tells me that that part of the main relay is alive, and that this may not be a main relay problem at all. So working by myself again, trying to find out what I'm missing here. What I did, I have the key on right now, and I have my little remote start here hooked up, and that's just hooked up to the S post of the starter, and so I can crank it from here. Okay, and then the next thing I did is I pulled the PCV hose off, and I'm just using a propane bottle, and of course I'm not going to turn the flame on, but just going to add propane into the intake while I'm cranking it. I'm not sure if that's enough. Not a whole lot of propane coming out of here. It did seem to want to start there for a second. I need something a little bit more substance, I think. I'm gonna see if I have anything flammable in the garage. Found some carburetor cleaner. You know, some of you guys like starting fluid for getting cars running without fuel, which is my suspicion here. We're missing fuel. But I don't like starting fluid for a diagnostic aid because I've had cars sound like they want to start with starting fluid and there's no spark at all. So it's just such a volatile gas that I just don't like it for diagnostics. I want to see if this car will run on something a little less volatile than starting fluid. So putting some carb clean into this hose. Let's try that again. Does not seem to want to run off of that. So I think what I'm going to do next is check for spark. Since it didn't react with fuel like I would have liked to have seen, I'm going to check for spark next. That doesn't mean we won't revisit fuel. I don't know if this orifice was big enough where I was spraying fuel in. I may have to go through the air intake. That might have been an inaccurate test, but it's real easy to check spark. I'm using an incandescent test light connected to ground. Some of you have asked me about this light before. It's actually a Craftsman test light. I probably bought this thing about 15 years ago. It was bought at Sears, so you know, for less than 20 bucks. This is an external coil on this design Honda, so I have a coil wire here, and what I can do is take this coil wire off and just leave a little air gap here. Definitely want to keep this spark away from the battery. You ever see a battery blow up in your face, you'll be a little more cautious around them. I think that should show up right there. And use my test light and looking for spark. Okay, and it's pretty decent, at least a ½ inch. I'd like to see a little bit stronger than that, but I think that's enough for this car to run, and it did feel like fuel. Let's make sure that we're getting spark coming out of the distributor too. It's not good enough to just check spark from a coil at times. Let's make sure that it's not getting lost in the cap and rotor. And I'll try to get you a little better shot. And again, took the plug wire off. And I want to see this spark at least come out to this area. The electrode's probably in here, so we got a pretty good distance it has to come out. I have consistent spark. It definitely sounded like it wanted to run right there, which is putting me back toward fuel again, guys. I think maybe this test I did with the carb clean, we're going to redo it. And this time I'm going to go into the air intake. All right, let's retry the fuel test again using carburetor cleaner. I didn't even spray any in it yet. This might be residual from before. Sure seems like it wants to run. All right, so just goes to show you, doing some of these tests, you have to redo them, revisit them, rethink what you're doing. And when I was putting fuel into this PCV line, it clearly was not enough volume to run the car. If I go into the air intake, you guys saw it running off of the carburetor cleaner and dying out whenever the fuel source burned up. So definitely a lack of fuel here. I'm in my driveway at home. I'm trying to avoid the fuel pump area, I'm hoping for an access panel. Some of these Hondas give us one to access the pump, to check pump powers and grounds. That's the direction I need to go, putting a fuel pressure gauge on this car. Let's see what kind of system it has. Depending on where the fuel filter is, they put an access. Oh no, I can easily verify pressure on this design. There's a bolt right here. I think I'll do that, as I haven't shown this design before, so we'll do that. Let's get our fuel pressure gauge on here, check for pressure. You know, we can take a look at maybe an injector while we're back there too, but I think fuel pressure first. Okay, on some of these Hondas, they've put this access port on top of the fuel filter. And on this one, it's actually easier to get to. It's right here on top of the rail. Just beware when you guys are doing this, you have to be aware of rest pressure. If there actually is fuel pressure in the system, let's say we don't have a pump issue and we have an injector issue, and we have rest pressure in the system, we need to be aware of that. So as I'm taking this loose, you see a little bit of fuel coming out of there. We just need to be aware of that. We don't want to get sprayed in the face by fuel. So not a lot in there. You know, heat is going to make that boil, and that's really what we're looking at now, is a lot of vapor. A lot of people would take that as an indication. Hey, I have fuel. You can't do that. Fuel injection systems work off of pressure. Just because you have a volume of fuel does not mean that fuel pressure is good. You need to put a gauge on it. And you got to be careful when you take this off. There's a little gasket right there, so a little seal. And the tool that I'm putting in its place, it's a neat little piece. It is a little fitting, has an O-ring on it, and it is the same thread pitch as what I just took out. Comes in some of these master kits, and this does not need to be over tightened. Actually, looking at this, that is the wrong one. Okay, now that's the right one. And what I've had with these, you know, a lot of people like to over tighten them. You don't have to, guys. We're just doing a temporary test. You know, almost hand tight is good with this gasket to seal it. It's a rubber gasket, unlike the metal one that came off of the piece that went in there. So we thread this into that fuel pump test port. That makes a nice spot for me to put my gauge. Then my hose adapts to that, and pressure gauge on my hose. All right, and as you can see, we have no fuel pressure. So with no fuel pressure, I'm not going to bother checking the fuel injectors. I'm going to go after this fuel pressure issue. I guess I could show you an injector that's firing if you guys want me to. And these boots are already split. These are the old style injectors that unplugging them are really difficult to do. You know what, I'll do it just because some of you are going to want these other testing methods. You might have a time where fuel pressure is maybe something you can't do, but you do have a test light and you want to check for injector pulse. I'll show it to you. It's really not necessary here, but I'm going to unplug one of these injectors. These clips are a little tricky to do. And just a simple check we do first would be test light to ground. Test light to ground, what we want to have is a power on one of these injectors, or one of the wires on the injector. Hoping that's showing up here for you guys. I'm working in pretty bright sunlight here. We got power on that injector. Make sure that test light's showing up. Yes. All right, so that's my feed wire. And that would mean that this is the control, the one next to it. So that one would just simply be going to battery positive. So my test light's on battery positive now. And when I find a ground, you see the light lights. So I'm looking for a pulsed ground on this other wire, and I am not sticking this test light into the female terminal. I'm putting it next to it. Cranking it over, that test light should flicker. It's pretty dim. It is definitely flickering. That means we have injection control. I'm hoping the camera is picking that up. I'll do it one more time. Maybe if I put my hand around it, kind of shield some of this light. All right, so a way to verify injection pulse. Test light flickers, you have control. There's other factors in this too, guys. I mean, you know, we have spark, so that's telling you have a good cam crank signal. And you know, doing the injection pulse really tells you the same thing, that your inputs are good. That's not a problem. You have injection pulse, that means cam and crank signals are good. So different ways to attack it. We're going after a fuel pump issue. Is this the main relay that's causing this? It still could be. I think in one of my newer videos, I think it was a 99 Honda Accord that I did a no start. It ended up being one of the solder joints on the main relay that was just affecting the fuel pump circuit. So it could be that. We'll go back and see what kind of access we have at the pump and figure out direction from there. Okay, so I found no access to this fuel pump. I looked in the trunk and I pulled the rear seat up. I did not see an access cover. This 93 two-door coupe, you know, I might be wrong, maybe there is one, but I'm going to move in a different direction. And it was nice that my friend here has a Haynes manual actually in his car, and the wiring diagram on this is actually pretty decent. What I'm going to do is check for power on the main relay to the fuel pump using this diagram. And we see the main relay right here. The circuit I'm concerned about is this solid yellow wire, and it's the only solid yellow we have. So we got, you know, yellow black, yellow blue, black yellow, but this solid yellow, we're going to check for power right there first, see what we get. I really don't want to jack this car up and get underneath it, so that's what I'm trying to avoid. Okay, here's your main relay. Right here is your steering column, and so looking up at it, it's just to the right of the steering column. And I'm just going to use my test light, and of course with a new location for my test light ground, we need to make sure that the test light works. So before I go after the fuel pump wire on this, which we said is a solid yellow, looks like it's one on the end right here. I believe the yellow blue, yellow black, they were hot from fuses, so I should be able to touch one of those. There we go. All right, and the purpose of that was to make sure that my test light has a good ground. I can't stress this enough. When it comes to troubleshooting, you need to eliminate as many variables as possible. One of them being your test light needs to have a good ground to be accurate. So we're ready to do the test now. I'm going to move down here to the solid yellow, and that is that wire right there. And we don't expect it to be lit right now. I'm just back probing this. I need to crank it, but I need a free hand, so I kind of have to stuff this light in between the housing and the wire here. Get my hand over on the ignition switch and crank it. There you go, there's your fuel pump circuit. And you can actually watch this too if you turn the key off. I believe this will give us a prime. Turn the key on. You saw the 2-second prime there. So that pump is working fine. Sorry, not the pump. The pump circuit is working fine, at least up here. So we do not have a main relay problem. And it looks like, you know, really at this point I could call a pump, but I think to be 100%, this guy being my friend, we need to make sure we don't have a pump power or ground problem underneath. You know, there's multiple ways to do this. I know that. I think the method I'm going to use next is to do an amperage measurement right here on this yellow wire. Why not? I mean, I don't have to jack the car up or anything. I can get an amp probe around this yellow wire, take a measurement. That may give me some direction and prevent me from having to go underneath. Something else I noticed early on in this diagnosis, and I'm not saying this is related, I don't even know yet if it is or not. I mean, really what stood out to me is a wire cap, you know, an electrician wire cap. We don't use these on cars. So somebody's been here, and what I noticed is this terminal, I'm not going to move it too much just in case this is the problem. This terminal is loose. See, moving on that. Anyway, you know, just picture for a second maybe a body ground problem. Where does the fuel pump get its ground? Through the body. I'm not saying that's the problem, but it's why I always go underneath and verify wiring. Well, I don't want to say always. It really will be dependent on the amperage result we get here. But it's why I want to verify powers and grounds at the pump and not guess. It's not about guesswork. It doesn't take that long to do it. Check your power and ground. Just using my Snap-on Vantage. It's an old unit for this test. And I'm actually using my Pico amp probe. And I have an adapter that goes from a BNC to a banana style adapter for this tool. It works perfectly. And this adapter is available at aeswave.com. That's where I got this one. It allows me to use my BNC style amp probe on really any tool I have. So I've connected it, set it to a 1-volt scale, which is a 10 amp. Every 100 millivolts is 1 amp on the conversion. So do your math. A 1-volt scale is 10 amps. I'm going to clip this around the yellow wire underneath. These are polarity sensitive. We'll just clip it around it and we'll worry about that later. You got to make sure the jaws of the amp clamp are all the way around that wire and only that wire. Re-zero it, come back up to the tool. My hopes, guys, for this test is that I'll have a pretty decent amperage here. Turn the key off, key on. I have no current flow at all. Let's try that again. No current flow at all, so I'm going to have to get underneath this car. I think what I'm going to do first is to tighten up that battery cable. Or should I? In case that is our problem, and I can show you a bad ground underneath. Yeah, I'm gonna go underneath. As I get underneath this thing, and by the way, safety is everything, guys. Always use a jack stand. Never get under a car without a jack stand, ever. But as I get underneath this, I don't see on any of the corners a way to access the wiring, and so what that means to me is that there must be an access cover under this rear seat. Now, I didn't take the rear seat all the way out. I just kind of pulled back and looked. I'm gonna have to go back up there again. Nope, it's not there. But I did find a harness. It comes over this way, and it does have this solid yellow wire in it. I believe this is my pump wire. So that means it's in the trunk. And man, I looked in the trunk already, but as usual, there's a bunch of crap in the trunk that I didn't feel like moving. Guess I gotta move it. So I opened the trunk and hey, what do you know? Found a fuel pump. So it looks like maybe not too long ago he changed this pump. This is something that I was not aware of. But little clues along the way. Okay, I found the access to the wiring on this. It's not really an access panel. All there is a hole. And there's a grommet that would go here that was out. And I believe I found the wires to the pump. It's this yellow and black. I just took a little bit of the tape off right there. And, you know, the hard part about this is knowing for sure. There's another connector that runs over this way that has a yellow wire going to it too. And I don't believe that's for the pump. I believe it's these two. So the way I'm going to verify that is to grab a voltage reading right here and crank it over and see if I have power on that, and then we'll check our ground, which I believe is next to it. Okay, difficult part to this is finding a good ground under here. I mean, this trunk is soaking wet. Again, we're in the rust belt here. It looks like underneath maybe by the speakers I got a decent ground. If I don't show power on this wire, I'm not going to panic or start chasing a power problem because I need to verify my ground first. But going after the power on the pump, I'm using a hook tool. All right, so for this one, I do have my son Jake helping me. So go ahead and crank that for me, bud. Okay, good. All right, so two things. Again, my test light definitely has a good ground, and the second one would be that is my pump power feed. You see we're getting power down to this pump. So ground is a concern. Some of you guys didn't like my video I did maybe a year or so ago where I'm showing how to check a pump ground with a test light. Hey, if this ground is bad, this test light will light on this ground. So I'm going to do it first. I'll get you a voltage reading on it too, but just moving this over to the ground wire now, which is right next to that. Do the same check. Go ahead and crank that, Jake. All right, and that light did not light, telling us that that ground is good. If this ground is bad, the power runs through the winding of the fuel pump, comes out on its way to ground, but there not being a ground, there would not be a voltage drop on the pump circuit, and that test light would light. And that's what I showed in that video years ago. Just to prove it to you guys, I'll get you a voltage reading on that ground. It's really at this point not necessary, but I'll do it real fast. Using the same ground location my test light was on, I'm going to redo the power check because I want to make sure that my meter has a good ground. Go ahead, crank that, Jake. All right, good. Got 10 volts on that pump circuit cranking. We had some drops in that. Go ahead, crank that again. Okay. Just looked like we had a little bit of pump movement there. I could almost see some armatures turning. All right, doesn't change anything. Go into the ground now. But I revisited that because now I'm confident in my meter ground. And when I do this ground to ground voltage drop test, then I can be comfortable with what I'm seeing. All right, crank that, Jake. All right, cool. So just a little bit of a rise there. Good power, good ground. This is a bad fuel pump, and I don't care if you put a new one in it or not. Now, you know, one of the things that we could have done maybe a while ago was to beat on the fuel tank, see if the car will run. You know, that's all well and good, but these procedures I'm showing you guys here are important procedures. So I'll try it once. I'm gonna beat on the tank. Go ahead, crank it, Jake. So car's now running. I know. I should have done that 20 minutes ago, right? Okay, I wouldn't argue with that. If you wanted to approach this from that, you know, from that standpoint, you know, it's a valid test. I don't mind doing that, but I think going through the motions here are important. Knowing how to, you know, check the main relay wire coming out was good. Verifying power and ground at a fuel pump is always good. Doing an amperage measurement on a pump, all of that's important. Bad fuel pump, no question about it. Have about 17 millivolts on this pump ground right now. You know, we could do current measurements and RPM measurements on the pump, but it's really not necessary at this point. He definitely needs a fuel pump. Wiring is confirmed front to back. This vehicle died. We lost fuel pressure. Most likely what it is, pump's warming up. It's got poor brush contact in the pump motor itself. He's going to need a fuel pump.